to our panelists. It's an interesting moment. We have seen at firsthand, Kazan is in fact not quite the largest environmental organization in America, but we are the largest Jewish environmental organization, probably the largest faith-based environmental organization. We've seen at firsthand, not merely that we're in a climate crisis and that it's really important to take it on, but that the process of doing so can build profound relationships. Just one little news flash that everybody on this webinar should be aware of. Kazan is 21 years old, and for 19 of those 21 years, we've worked with the Arab Institute for Environmental Studies, based at Kibbutz Keturah in the Negev. And they yesterday announced a new executive director. And the new executive director is Dr. Tarek Abu Hamid, who is a Palestinian who lives in East Jerusalem. He's got 5 kids. He was at one point acting chief scientist in Israel's Ministry of Science. He's an amazing guy. I mean, I've met him many times. You could have no better on-the-ground representation of the extent to which environment has no boundaries, and the way that environment as a challenge lets us come together across difference, as the announcement that Tarek is going to be leading the Arab Institute. So with that, we're going to talk about some of the successes of the Israeli environmental movement. We're going to talk a little bit about perhaps how we could be engaged, but I actually want to start off with challenges. And Maya, we're particularly honored to have you on. It's particularly appropriate. We've had this awful oil spill. You run Salul, which is the largest NGO addressing clean water for Israel and for its neighbors. Can you just tell us some of the challenges overall, and also just this oil spill, where it's all up to?
Yes, well, Salul means clear in Hebrew. And for us, this is a devastating event because we've been talking about this and we've been warning from this event, such an event, for many years now. We're talking about the fact that Israel is not prepared for dealing with emergency situations like this at sea. We're talking about the fact that the Ministry of Finance is not equipping the Ministry of Environmental Protection with enough manpower and enough funds in order to deal with all the many tasks that it has. And it's very, very sad what's happening. It's the biggest environmental, ecological disaster on the coast of Israel, at least in many decades. I don't know, maybe sometime in the past something was different, but at least for 40, 50 years, we don't remember anything like this. Unbelievable big balls of tar just, bombarded our coast. And the amazing thing was the volunteers. Over 11,000 people came out to the coast, and the NGOs who managed everything, basically, and the municipalities that managed the situation. These are the light side of this, the beautiful side of what happened to us. And hopefully, we'll manage to make this disaster into an opportunity for change in the way that the environment is being treated in Israel. This Saturday, for instance, we have, I hope, will be the biggest environmental rally for protection of the marine environment with all the NGOs and many marine lovers, sea lovers. Israel is a sea country. More than half of the people live along the coast. And suddenly this year, everybody understands how important the sea is. For the majority of the year, we were not allowed to go to the beach because of COVID. And we were closed at home for 3 different times in which we were not allowed to go into the water or to go to the beach. And then when we were allowed, then the beach became contaminated, which is crazy. And we even had people from hospitals, staff from the hospitals came to clean up the beach because they said, this is just unbelievable. We can't live without our beach. And despite the fact that it's very, very devastating, it's not oil and it's not condensate, which is the oil liquid that is being produced along with the gas along our coast. And we are basically alerting of much bigger challenges and dangers that they are along our coast, because our luck, if we can say so, was that the ship that spilled this amount of oil was about 50 kilometers away from the coast, and that's how the oil became tar. But if we have an oil disaster, like real oil or condensate, then we would also be affected in our desalination plants, and the shipping would stop, and the tourism would be affected, because now, for instance, we have the restaurants and the fishing is stopped. But this could be something that will cost many billions of shekels or dollars to the Israeli market, and we're not insured. There aren't enough guarantees by the offshore drilling companies that are working in Israel, and by Katsa, which is the Israeli oil company that is planning on bringing basically the oil from the United Emirates. Then now they want to ship it through the Red Sea to Eilat, and then through the ground all the way to Ashkelon, and to have huge tankers come and pick it up from Ashkelon all the way to Europe. And basically they're going to endanger both Eilat and the Mediterranean. And these are the big threats that we are warning from.
Maya, thank you for that. When we come back to you after we've heard from the ambassador and Yossi, I actually want to talk about some of the lessons from this. Like, what are the changes that we need to make based on what's happened? But I want to go to the ambassador. Ambassador Gidon Bahar, we're so honored that you are with us today, and so grateful. Ambassador Bahar has been head of the Africa desk at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has been ambassador to Senegal, and is now Israel's special envoy for climate change and sustainability. And so I think, Ambassador, I'd like to hear, just widening out from the oil spill, but what do you think as the key environmental challenges for Israel at this point?
There are many environmental challenges. First of all and foremost, I think that it is the disappearance of the open space or of nature in Israel due to construction. I live in a city called Modi'in, which is a home for about 100,000 people. And every year, the state of Israel builds 50,000 new apartments. It means that every year in Israel, we build twice the size of Modi'in. So open space, nature, environment is disappearing in a galloping rate. And I think that this is one of our major challenges, how to safeguard nature, how to save the open spaces for us, for our children and grandchildren. I mean, if we continue like that, in a few decades, 20, 30 years, most of the state of Israel north to Beersheba will be covered by asphalt, by beton, concrete, cities, etc. So this is really a huge challenge, also because the population continues to grow in a very rapid way of about 2% per year, which is equivalent to 200,000 inhabitants every year. So one must also address that, but in a way that doesn't harm the environment, the nature, and especially the open spaces in Israel. Another threat is a threat coming to our maritime zone, or the sea, which is was elaborated before by Maya, who is doing really extremely important job. I must say she's so devoted to that. It's amazing. And I must say also that Yossi is really one of the best ambassadors Israel has in the world today, and he promotes solar energy and resilience to climate change, etc. So these are really excellent people on this panel. And Nigel, you have all the credentials that were mentioned before. But really, also protecting our sea is very important from future pollutions. We need really to create more protected areas in Israel, more nature reserves, more national parks, so that the status of these areas will be protected by law. Another danger or another challenge for us is, of course, the issue of water. Although we are desalinating lots of our water is disappearing in Israel due to climate change, and climate change is indeed one of the major risks in Israel, but also to the region around Israel, and this is extremely important. Israel most probably will be capable of dealing with the challenges of climate change. But the countries around that, there is a doubt about this. So we really have to focus our attention on building resilience in the region, in the Middle East, so there will be no huge disruptions of public order or refugees waves, etc., etc. So this is another big challenge for us. I can enumerate many more others, but I think that this is enough, and I remain optimistic that we are on the good track to solve them.
I want to say thank you for that. And I just want to add a couple of things for people who are interested in population. Dr. Alon Tal did an amazing book called The Land is Full. And I also want to say about open spaces, Shnat Shemitah is coming up, the Shemitah year. And we argued 7 years ago that it would be kind of nice if Haganat HaTeva made all of the parks free in Israel for Shnat Shemitah as a way of helping everybody to really appreciate them. I hope that might happen. We turn now to the Honorable Sir Yossi Abramowitz. I was kind of impressed that I'd put on trousers today. I want to share with everybody in a proper shirt, but the ambassador's wearing a jacket and Yossi is wearing a tie. And I want to say, those of you who are on this webinar, clearly somebody here is very, very important. Yossi Abramowitz is a force of nature, a dear friend, a pioneer of the Israeli solar industry, and somebody who wants to hold Israel and the Jewish people to high standards. So Yossi, thank you for being with us. And we're going to talk about successes in a minute. What do you see as some of the key challenges for Israel?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being here. I remember when Chazon was basically 1 day old, so Mazel Tov on 21 days. That's an amazing journey, and Your Excellency and Maya. I really think it's on the greenhouse gas emissions. It's actually wonderful now to have common cause with the United States government, where the last 4 years we didn't when it came to climate issues and energy. And so I was on the Israeli negotiating team at Paris, and we had a very low goal that we were allowed to go for, which was 17% renewable energy by 2030. The current government has now magnanimously said, okay, we're going to go for 30%. We're nearly going to double that. But 2/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions, at least, are coming from the energy sector. And the current government policy is really we have already a 90% fossil fuel monopoly on energy, and it's going to remain a major monopoly essentially for another generation under the current government and regulations. And so that has to change. That has to change dramatically. We're in election number 4 in 2 years, and we're going to try to really put this on the map. And we also look forward to partnering with Biden-Harris and the American Jewish community, because in a sense, a partnership there, it's one planetary system, and each country has to do its part. And when we get to successes, you'll hear that Israel can easily go to 100% daytime solar by 2030. We've already accomplished that in part of the country, which we'll tell you more about. But it's energy, it's greenhouse gas emissions, and then, of course, transportation, which is fossil. We wouldn't be so worried about these oil spills if there was no need for oil. There shouldn't be any need for oil, given the abundant, clean energy that comes to us every day from the powers above.
Yes, and as you were speaking, I wanted to add, of course, I didn't say this in the introduction, but people can Google this. When then Senator Harris and her family went to Israel, she had to go somewhere for Friday night. Where was she going to go for Friday night dinner? And the answer was Yossi Abramowitz and Rabbi Susan Silverman, his wife.
And thank you for that historic footnote. And it's only a footnote. I don't want to overstate it, but over dinner, climate was one of the 2 or 3 major things we spoke about. And we told her of her plans of getting the Arava to 100% daytime solar by 2020. And she was like, 100% by 2020? That's impossible. And I actually laid it all out. And we've, of course, stayed in touch with her and her staff. And so really proud that in Biden-Harris that their policy is 100% renewables day and night, 2035. So I hope we had a little Shabbat pixie dust role in being able to say, let's go for 100%.
So thank you. And let me use that as a segue actually to talking about some of the successes of the Israeli environmental movement. I want to say straightforwardly that I think occasionally people in this country sometimes are cynical. It's a cynical moment. But I would say that firsthand, really genuinely, I've seen how taking on environmental challenges is capable of bringing people together across difference. I think it's true in the United States and important in the United States. And I think it's actually true in Israel and the region. We see with the Arava Institute in the early days, David Lehrer, who was the director, used to say, we hope that at some point, the Israeli Minister of the Environment, the Palestinian Minister of the Environment, and the Jordanian Minister of the Environment will have a problem and they'll pick up a phone to sort it out with each other, and they'll all be graduates of the Arava Institute. And truthfully, he was saying that 15 years ago, and now there are alumni moving into those positions. There really are significant success stories, I think, underneath the radar. And so I think I'm going to jiggle up the order, but Ambassador, let's go to you first. What do you think are some of the key successes of the Israeli environmental movement? What are the things that we should know about that we may not know about?
Okay. In addition, for me to be an employee of the government and an ambassador, I'm also part of the environmental movement in Israel in my spare time. So I really almost 100% of the day and night dealing with these issues. I can tell you that in where I live in Modi'in, we just won one of the biggest successes in the last years. A declaration that parts of the hills surrounding Modi'in, which are crucial for the national ecological corridor of Israel, will be declared a national park. It means that no one will build on them forever. And so this is one of the biggest successes. I think that rehabilitation of wild animals into the wild, biblical animals like wild donkeys, deer, etc., is also one of the successes of the environmental movement in Israel. But I think that the environmental movement in Israel today is becoming really a force, first of all, a political force in Israel, but also a mind-changing force, and more and more people are taking into consideration environmental issues and environmental considerations because of the work which is done by activists today. And activism, environmentalism, activism in Israel is getting stronger and stronger, and I'm confident that it will be even more influential in the future, because people like Maya here, like Yossi here, are doing excellent job, and they work tirelessly to put the considerations of the environment in the middle of the public discourse in Israel.
Can you say a couple of words about the growing normalization with UAE and some of the Arab states, and underneath all of that with Saudi Arabia? Is this fundamentally actually a challenge because Israel is starting to ally with petrodollar states, or is it good because Israel is somehow going to help them to transition away from oil? Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a very positive development. We have now full diplomatic ties with Bahrain, the Emirates, with Morocco, 3 new countries. I myself served as a deputy head of the Israeli mission in Tunisia for 4 years, some 20 years ago. Actually, 3 of my children were born in Tunisia. They were the first and the last ones. And when we left Tunisia, we were forced to leave Tunisia. We were expelled from Tunisia some 20 years ago. And when I see the normalization again of ties between Israel and its neighbors, then I say, Gideon, you see, it wasn't lost. Your 4 years of hard work in Tunisia weren't lost. It's a very positive thing, and there is lots going on today in the fields of environment, cooperation in water, cooperation in renewable energies, in hydrogen energy, clean hydrogen energy, food security, etc., etc. We must build contacts with these countries for the stability of the region. They need, one of the reasons that they came forward and re-established or established ties with Israel is because they understand they need Israeli experience in the areas most acute and most important for them, namely climate change, water, agriculture, and food security. And together we really have to stabilize the Middle East because the challenges ahead of us continue growing.
Ambassador, thank you for that. Maya, I want to come back to you, first of all, for successes in general, but I think also really lessons from the oil spill, because I think it really has been shocking and it really has revealed fragility. And Salula has been doing serious work for a long time about what needs to happen. Can you just share some of the successes and some of what you'd like to see change in a way?
Well, one of the big successes that we are very, very proud of us being the ones leading it was the shutting down of the ammonia reservoir of Bar Haifa Haifa Chemicals in Haifa 3 years ago. It was considered, Hassan Nasrallah from Hezbollah called it Lebanon's nuclear bomb because it was so dangerous and it was in the center of Haifa and over 1 million people were exposed to its danger. And it's not the similar kind of ammonia and it's not the similar type of threat, but it was still very similar to what we saw happen in Beirut last year with such a huge explosion going on. So the ammonia we had was less explosive, but was very, very poisonous, and it could have killed hundreds of thousands of people, just have them drop dead, which was horrible. And this was a very big battle that we led. It was a battle that the environmental community led for 30 years, the environmental community in Haifa. And then we came by and we said, okay, we're going to do this. And within 6 years, we managed to shut it down. And we have the backing of Morris Khan, who's our beneficiary, and our chairman is Mr. Benjamin Khan, who's Morris's son. And we are a tougher kind of NGO, so we can do things that others sometimes cannot. But what happened with the ammonia tank was like the first domino block to start a whole ripple effect, because suddenly people realized that this big undefeatable industry was defeatable. At the same time, so suddenly all the attitude also towards the petrochemical industry in Bazan, in Haifa, changed. And now there's a campaign saying not only change the way they work, but shut them down also. And towards the offshore drilling for gas and oil, there's become a much bigger community now because of the Leviathan rig, which is along the coast, and a new NGO that was created for this and for this situation specifically, called Home Guards, which became afterwards into a big national NGO that is taking on the issue of renewable energy instead of the petrochemical challenges. And we're seeing growing effects. Also, Greta Thunberg had much effect in Israel. We have amazing youth for climate in Israel, and they were so effective. So their parents started also Parents for Climate. We have Teachers for Climate. We're all working so much together. And now we have coalitions working. We're all working under the umbrella of Life and Environment, which is the umbrella organization for environmental NGOs. Both Yossi and I are directors there, we're board members there. And this manages, it allows us to do amazing things in collaboration. So today we have like the environmental activist groups are together against the petrol in in Eilat and the Red Sea. And we have a group talking about, it's all group, when I'm saying group, it's many, many NGOs working together. We're working to divest investments from petrol to renewable energies. We're calling it Now With Our Money, and it's the Clean Money Energy. It's the Clean Money Forum, which is also it's built by NGOs and under the auspice of the Life and Environment. And we have this coalition now working together on the elections, as I said, in order to affect all the candidates from all the various parties, everybody. We're working with them to have like one chief person who's in charge of climate, who would actually study and learn. And we're not only saying, okay, put this as your commitments for the elections, but actually we want to see it also become part of the new government that would become, and they had to be part of the coalition terms, and we want to have a climate law. We have a lot of dreams and we have a lot of aspirations. I cannot say that we're still there yet. We do have a few new people who are talking climate from Yesh Atid and from Gidon Sa'ar, halfway in Gidon Sa'ar, because he put Ze'ev Elkin in front, and Ze'ev Elkin was a horrible Minister of Environment. He was actually the only Minister of Environment that we in Tzilul had a campaign personally against him because he was so problematic. But we see also in Israel Beitenu and in Avoda, all the parties now are starting to talk climate. They understand the youth are doing amazing work. Once you have teenagers come up on all the campaign gatherings, they cannot answer different, we could say the exact same things, but when you have a teenager saying it, the whole reaction changes, and we're seeing it doing a lot of effect. So we're working together in activism and in change. We're helping the banks. We're now, through our work on divestment and investments, we actually are starting to help them to bring down regulations, barrier regulations and bureaucracy regulations, because suddenly when we approach, along with the banks and along with the industry, with the good industry, we're separating the good industry and the bad industry, and nobody's a bad person, but they don't understand. I hope they don't understand their effects of what they're doing. And if they do understand, they would do it differently, because, I want to believe that everybody is good at the end of the day, but we're helping everybody fast forward it, because we know we have only 10 years to stop this horrific future for all of mankind. And as you mentioned, the new peace that we have, this is an opportunity for good. And right now, the government is taking it all the way to the wrong direction, to more gas and to more oil. And that's not what needs to happen. We want to stop oil, and we want to have like a whole B'sorah for the world, say, from Israel, Tavo B'sorah, and this is how we need to do Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam is to change, to save the world. From Eretz HaKodesh, we need to save Eretz HaKodesh. Eretz HaKodesh is in grave danger of pollution, and the people of Israel are in grave danger of so many horrific sicknesses that happen to us because of pollution. That this needs to change, and this is the whole attitude to change that we're working together to do. And we used to be many, many fingers, now we're a fist, and that's a big difference.
Thank you. Yossi, you have a lot to say there. Pick it up and run with that. And also just say a word about Israel and Africa in terms of Israeli successes.
Okay, so I guess I'm here wearing several hats. One is a green donor. The other is a green activist. The third is a green impact investor. And I guess if Gidon allows me, as an informal green ambassador to our friends in Africa. In terms of donors, there's been now an awakening in Israel. We really want to join the American Jewish community through a Green Funders Forum, which is under the Jewish Funders Network. Marla Stein, who's co-chair, is on this. This is one of the ways that we could really work together to be able to get some successes over the finish line. There, it used to be, you guys in America shouldn't interfere in internal Israeli security matters or whatever it is. But environment, this is a global issue, and so this is actually so kosher to be able to join forces on. So one is, I think that there's a philanthropic awakening which is brand new, and that gives hope. As an activist, I'm going to look forward a week or two and say, I'd like to say that our successes will be a climate decision. It will be a mediocre, a compromise climate decision. We've been trying for quite some time to get it through, and it's been watered down and blocked by the energy and finance ministries because of entrenched interests, things that you also face. Like Obama couldn't get a climate bill through during the BP oil spill, and really talks about that's indicative of the power of fossil fuel politically. And we have those challenges here, but I do believe we're going to have a climate bill perhaps before the election. This coming Thursday, we're going to have our first climate debate because of the Greta soldiers here, the Normalization Aklim, and I think that too is going to be a turning point. And as an impact investor, myself, Nigel, David Rosenblatt, Kibbutz Keturah, Howie Rodenstein, we were the first investors in the solar industry in the state of Israel. We did get from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea to 100% daytime solar by 2020, which was our ridiculous goal, and it's setting a world record, and it will probably be also the first region in the world that night and day will be completely powered by the sun. That should be by about 2025, and it's profitable. It's solar is a third the price of natural gas in the state of Israel, and the solar stocks are high, and we've created an impact business model that works. And something, if people want to, send me a message, I'm happy to talk to you offline about those kinds of opportunities. Now, when we're building the first field, Activism, this is, Nigel, we're coming up to 10 years since we broke ground on the first solar field. And people started coming from the developing world, and 58 countries came that year to say, hey, Startup Nation, can you help us? So we set up a sister company called Gigawatt Global. We're using the same economic model that is profitable in Israel and with Arab power. But no one had ever done utility scale solar in Africa before. The moral upside is that there's 600 million people without access to power, and 200 to 300 million burning expensive and polluting diesel, and hence, greenhouse gas emissions. And so if anybody could unlock that value financially, then the mitzvah opportunities would be huge. So we were the first success of the U.S. Power Africa program. When we plugged in Rwanda, it was 6% of the country's power. I know it's a public forum, but it's not official, so it shouldn't be in the press, but I'm going to, don't tell anybody, but tomorrow, as soon as tomorrow, in a poor country called Burundi, the solar field will be turned on for the first time to supply 15% of the country's power, in addition to the economic development. It's unofficial, so it can't be in the press, but this is JCPA and friends of Nigel, and so, but pretty soon we'll be able to make a huge public announcement. I just spent a month in Liberia trying to do the deal on 50% of their power, and we're in 10 different countries on an impact investment model. But what we do is, we don't use Israel as a model because Israel's under 10%, and we're working on that, and I'm ashamed of it, and this is where our partnership across the Atlantic can really juice this up. But the fact that we can use the Arava and say to an African country, would you like to go to 100% renewable and lower your energy prices and bring economic and social development, quadruple bottom line? The answer is usually yes. It's just hard to do so, which is why Gidon and his colleagues throughout Africa are critical for us to be able to Kimi Tzion Tetzeh Ora, that out of Zion a new light shall shine. It's hard, which is why other people haven't done it, but we are on the verge of becoming, as a country, a superpower of goodness through our industries and investments of goodness in Africa.
I want to talk in a minute just about America, in fact, and policy here, and how people here can be involved and how we can build stronger bridges. Just before we do, somebody had a question about the Orthodox and the Haredi community in Israel. And I don't need to hear from all of you, but I'd just like to hear from one of you to say a word about the evolution of the Orthodox, particularly the Haredi community, in relationship to environmental issues. And also a related question, somebody was saying, are there climate change deniers in Israel? Is that a significant part of the conversation? Maya, it seems like you're up, but briefly, because I want to...
Yes. Well, we've established a group. One of the things that we're very much hands-on in Salul is the issue of plastic, disposable plastic. So we've created a group called Bli Plastic Be'ezrat Hashem, and all the various groups of different types of religious people are there. And we work a lot together, and through this, we talk about climate, and we talk about changing our habits and many, many other things. And there is a lot of discussion, mostly about plastic and our personal habits, but also about climate. So, and there is growing awareness, there is a growing community. It's very small still, relatively to the general population, but more and more religious people of all groups, also Haredi, also the many, many types, are whoever understands becomes concerned. We just need to get more hasbara out there. You know, it's just making people understand.
So I want to go on now to, in a sense, sort of building bridges. One of the things that I was thinking, Maya, early on when you were just talking about the oil spill is how sad it is, but perhaps how necessary the relationship between tragedy and change. I'm old enough to remember the Maccabea Bridge disaster when Australian athletes fell into the Yarkon and two of them died, and they weren't falling 300 feet from the Golden Gate Bridge or the GW. They fell 12 feet into Israel's main river, which had been polluted, and it wasn't GE polluting the Hudson. It was 1 or 2 million middle-class Israelis living 30 years ago before there were contemporary environmental protections. This year, we had the fires in California. We've just had extreme cold in Texas. I think that JCRCs around the country, I think climate's clearly moving up the agenda. Intuitively, it feels like, and I'll share with everybody, by the way, that one of the things that we're really talking about is trying to strengthen the bridge between the American Jewish community and environmentalists in this country and environmental leaders in Israel. Some of us involved in this call have actually talked about trying to do that in the future. Kazan had a program, SIA, which did this a few years ago. If you are interested, be in touch with me or be in touch with JCPA or the consulate if you'd like to be involved in that. But I want to ask people at this moment of coming out of COVID, when we've seen how the natural world, how we are more vulnerable than we may realize ourselves or may have thought ourselves to be, where do you see opportunities, necessities for the American Jewish community to engage to make a positive difference in Israel? And conversely, how can the Israeli environmental movement make a difference here? And there was somebody from Jewish Earth Alliance who was saying very specifically, as somebody who's involved in Jewish climate activism in this country, how can I help make a difference in Israel? Yossi.
Yeah, so the first is move your money. Truly, like rabbinic pension funds, all the endowments of the foundations and federations and everything. I mean, the startup nation here has climate solutions, anything from milk to meat to energy to water to there's so many opportunities. Move your money and look at our stock market. It's historically done very well. A lot of solar companies have gone public at incredible valuations on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. We're currently still private company, but move your money. Your money is inadvertently dirty. It has impact. And if you don't know the impact, it's probably a negative impact. And soon it's going to be a stranded asset, particularly because of the next UN conference and Biden-Harris. So move your money. I know we're not supposed to use the word divest because we don't use it against Israel or whatever, but move your money, align your values, my friend James Cummings says, with your investments, with your values. And then also extend your philanthropy. Like this country, this tiny country with 7 different ecosystems and unique challenges, we could solve for so many of the global environmental challenges. It's the budgets of just the environmental groups currently is only like $2 million combined. If we could just double that, if there was a way to match from America on that, then every one of these challenges that we're facing, we could actually win and stand up to the oil and gas lobbies and to do so. Move your money to be aligned with your Jewish and Zionist values, and when you come here and you're meeting our leaders and stuff, then raise it as the first issue. Raise it as they're going to be surprised, because we know it matters to you, and we know it matters to the United States government. Raise it as the first issue, and the successes that we have, I hope, this notion of how do we get to 100%, we have some lessons learned that we're really, truly happy to share with the returning green superpower of the world.
I would only add to that, by the way, again, to everybody in the JCRCs here, I remember Karl Pope 20 years ago when he was head of the Sierra Club saying to a small group of Jewish leaders, when environmentalists stand up on Capitol Hill, they ignore us. When faith leaders stand up, it makes a difference. And I think that's absolutely true, and more true now. Ambassador, I wanted to just ask you to say a word about COP26. COP26 is coming up in November. As we get closer and closer to it, there is going to be more and more attention to that in the media. I'm interested to know, does Israel have a particular strategy in relationship to COP26? Are the things that you are planning to do there, and other ways that could or should be coordinated with diaspora Jewish communities?
Yes, I will say a few words about it, but I just want to go back a little bit to the question, your remark or question before of building bridges. And I want to say that there is a really big opportunity here for building bridges between Israel and the Jewish people, Israel and the Jewish communities in North America and the United States. It can ally us and put us together around common goals like the environment, climate change, sustainability, etc., which are important both for us, both for people in the United States and in North America, and they are aligned with Jewish moral and with Jewish beliefs. And this is something that we should do also in a practical way. And I want to say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has decided to take a campaign, to make a campaign on Earth Day, the 22nd of April. Each of our over 108 diplomatic missions abroad will have to do something in the field of environment, sustainability, climate change, etc., including the Israeli consulates and the embassies in North America. So if you know people there, please make a contact, reach out to them, and see how you can cooperate together in doing some good in the world and some tikkun olam. Also, I want to say that we all should be proud of innovations and technologies that are coming from Israel, which are a huge contribution to the problem, to the crisis, to the climate crisis. I mean, the biggest contribution Israel can make in combating climate change is by its experience and by its technologies, either in water, in agriculture, in reforestation, in renewable energies and energy storage, in alternative protein like cultivated meat or milk or eggs, etc. These are all innovations where Israel excels. We are number one in the world in recycling sewage water. Number one, 90% of the water in Israel is recycled. This is a world record. We have a world record in the prevention of leaks from urbanic water systems. Water is energy, and energy is greenhouse gases. Much can be done and much can be saved by these technologies. Now, coming to your question about COP26, we do not know yet what kind of form the COP will take. The COP is Conference of the Parties, the biggest meeting of the United Nations annually, and especially in the field of combating climate change, supposed to take place at the beginning of November in Glasgow, Scotland. We do not yet to what extent it will be virtually or hybrid or physical, etc. And we are preparing ourselves for that. We, as a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are concerned. We are concerned that there is no progress in negotiations and no resolutions are made. But we hope that with the new energy coming from the new administration and by the declarations made by some of the major economies in the world, like the European Union, Japan, North Korea, Argentina, South Africa, etc., Mexico, that they will go to zero emissions by mid-century, I think that we are on an optimistic road.
But I also add, sorry for what we can do, because this is the biggest important question, I think. Despite the fact that we're all so optimistic and we feel so good about ourselves and working in Israel, we're still in a very bad situation. We are few against many. We're tiny NGOs leading this combat against the biggest oil companies in the world. Chevron is here now in Israel. The United Emirates are going to start moving oil through Israel. Despite the fact that it sounds very optimistic, we need help. We need whatever donations, whatever minds, we need creative people to come and help us. We need to be able to make this into the most amazing campaign, to make people understand. And the beautiful thing about Israel, because we have so many languages, because we're kibbutz galuyot, once we do the right understanding here, once we teach everybody in Israel what to do, we can use these information to transfer it all over the world, because we have people here in Hebrew and in Arabic and in English and in French and in Spanish, and everybody here needs this hasbara, and then we could use it for the entire world to teach people how to change everything. One of our biggest dreams is to establish a center for education and policy change. This is something that would serve also the American jury. We have a lot of things we could do with the graduates of Taglit, Birthright, and with the federations. There's so many things. This is an opportunity for us to bridge the gaps with the Israelis and the American jury. I used to be the chief information officer for the Israeli Consulate General 20 years ago. I know the American jury very well. I'm very, very acquainted with the connections. There's so much to heal between many, because of many things that happened through the years. And we see it here in Israel, and we see it also with the diaspora. In Israel, groups, there's a lot of hatred. It's bad, but groups hate each other here. The various groups are very much separate today. And by environment, we start talking again. It brings us together again, because people understand and they put the differences aside and they work together to make good for the environment. And this is something that brings us together, and it could bring also the Jewish world together. This is an opportunity to do amazing things.
So thank you for that. We're going to start to come into land. Firstly, I just got a news flash from Haaretz, and perhaps other people did, saying that they've just announced that the oil spill was caused by a Libyan tanker that left Iran, and that Israel is accusing Iran of environmental terrorism. We'll see where that story goes. I guess that's fresh in. Jared Goldfarb had asked a question about food, and again, we can't take the question right now, but one of the things that hasn't been said is that industrial meat and dairy is one of the key drivers of anthropogenic climate change. And as it happens, the movement to challenge industrial meat production is stronger in Israel, frankly, than any other country in the world. And that's actually, for those of us who have had a 2,000-year-old tradition of keeping kosher, of saying literally, is this fit for me to eat? The American Jewish food movement has grown sharply in the United States in the last 20 years. And actually engaging with food policy locally and nationally is one of the ways that I believe that we can express Jewish values in a way that creates a better environment for everybody. Somebody mentioned Earth Day. Last year, before COVID, we were planning to have 50 people blow shofar in Times Square for Earth Day. Because of COVID, we couldn't do that, and we put it online, and we had not 50 people, but 1,500 people in a program called Sound the Call, which included Ruth Messenger, David Gergen, Mandy Patinkin, Bill McKibben. And this year, first of all, Earth Day officially said, we love that, we want to pick it up. This year, EarthX have come in as co-partners and have said they are going to make Sound the Call now a multi-faith religious platform within Earth Day. So to everybody on this call, I would say, mark your calendars, April 22nd, Sound the Call is between 10 a.m. and noon EST on Earth Day. And you should feel free to put out your own events, to do your own things with the hashtag Sound the Call. It's explicitly a moment for a religious environmental movement. For people who are interested in the Jewish environmental movement in this country, JCAN has been doing important work for a long time. Dayenu, who's grown sharply in the last year, Jewish Earth Alliance, there was a question from there, wanted to give a shout out for them. From Chazon, we have a Jewish youth climate movement. If you have teenagers who want to be involved in that, put us in touch with us. A Chazon Seal of Sustainability, which a growing number of communities are taking forwards. So there is a lot happening. And so I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the three of you. I want to thank JCPA, the consulate, and everybody on. And a quick last word from each of you. What's a moment of inspiration, a moment of tochachah, the last key piece of advice that you want to give us?
We need to be able to look our kids in the eyes and say we did everything we can. That's the end of the day. I mean, we can do it by investing money on new ideas. There's a whole world to be invented now. There's a whole world of services, of products, of policy. Each and every person. The good thing and the bad thing about climate change is that it's so big. So on the one hand, it's very big and it's difficult to deal with such a big thing. But on the other hand, each and every one of us can find whatever in their own world, what to do. It could be in the food industry, in the fashion industry, whatever you do, whatever you love, you can find a way to make a better tomorrow. And the tomorrow is already today, because climate change is already here, and we need to act, and we need to act fast.
Thank you. Yossi.
So many things I want to try to get in, but I'm going to focus on two. First is, we've learned during COVID that we can do with less. And so wouldn't it be great if this sabbatical year, Nige, that all Jews, not just religious Jews, but all Jews essentially observe the Sabbath in their own way, but a non-consumeristic day, so that we as a people can reduce our carbon footprint by 1/7, essentially. And then we're in a stronger moral position to say to all your friends that you sent me to at Windsor Castle 10 years ago at the Religions Alliance, to say, what about every faith community really observing a day of rest and cutting by 1/7? If we all cut by 1/7 our greenhouse gas emissions, the Earth will actually be back in balance. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be stopping pipelines or anything else. But what I really am so hopeful about are the young kids, the Greta. I do most of my work with them. I mean, I love Maya, and I feel like I see her every day on Zoom and all of that. But I'm doing most of my work with the teenagers. It gives me a tremendous amount of hope. And the other thing is that we couldn't engage the U.S. government and also the American Jewish community. You didn't want to be political about climate so much. But I know that working together, we can become a renewable light unto the nations.
Thank you. Gideon, Ambassador, last word from you.
I have only maybe 2 or 3 words to say. Be active, be proactive, do the best that you can, and really try to make a change. Even if it's a small change, it still is a change. So make a difference. Try to make a difference. Thank you.
So I want to thank you. And a couple of very last words from me. Somebody pointed out in the chat, I forgot to mention our Israel ride. It's nearly sold out, but if you want to ride on a bicycle from Jerusalem to Eilat this fall to support Chazon and the Arab Institute for Environmental Studies, you are warmly invited. A huge thank you to the consulate, JCPA, Yossi, to you personally, to everybody who's involved in this. And I just note that the next holiday on the calendar is Pesach. And this is the period traditionally to get rid of our chametz. And I want to note that chametz is not just breadcrumbs. It's all of the superfluities, all of the stuff that stops us from being free. And so I really want to, as it were, bless us all as we lead up to Pesach and as we slowly come out of COVID, that we should start to get rid of our superfluities, to get rid of the stuff that we don't need, and gradually enjoy the freedom to create a healthier and a more sustainable world for everybody. Thank you very, very, very much. And for now, thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
חג שמח, ביי.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.